Okay, let me give you a brief introduction to our students and fellow participants. Today, we have Professor Walter Block. He is a professor of economics at Loyola in New Orleans. Uh, to do a brief biography, Professor Walter Block went to high school with Bernie Sanders, and then he became affiliated with Ayn Rand and Nathaniel Branden, and then is a student of the late great Murray Rothbard. So, Walter, it is a pleasure to have you here. He's the author of several books, Defending the Undefendable, Toward a Libertarian Society, The Privatization of Roads and Highways. So, Walter, thank you again, and the floor is yours.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be with you. My topic is market failure, and I'm not a big fan of market failure. I don't think there's any such thing as a market failure, but let me try to introduce a few of them. The first market failure, whoops, oh, I have the eraser on. No wonder I can't write. I'll need write. Okay, so here is a diagram, and this is what is this? This is money. And this is utils. And what we have is diminishing margin of utility, which is not totally unreasonable. Namely, the more money you have, the better off you are, as long as this is positive, as long as it doesn't get into the quadrant below. I could even draw it below. Here, extra money would be negative, but we're going to stay in the positive realm. And here is a rich person, and here is a poor person. And what we're going to do is take some money away from the rich person. He used to have, say, $100 or $100,000, and we're going to take 1,000 away from him. And now he's going to have 99, and he's going to lose this box of utility. And over here is a poor person, and the poor person used to have 6,000. And now we're going to give him 7,000. And I'll make an arrow this way to show that we're taking money away from the rich person and giving it to the poor person. And the poor person gains all this utility. So if I make these little dashes over here, we could see how much extra utils we now have. So it's called, inequality is called a market failure. I think it's weird. First of all, what I should say what a market failure is. What a market failure is something that occurs in the free enterprise system, and the government can fix it. We don't usually think of bankruptcy as a market failure because the government can't fix bankruptcy, and no socialist even thinks that the government can fix that. But here, the government can fix it. And let me make this a 7, a better 7. There's a better 7. And this is seen as a market failure. And even Milton Friedman had who is no socialist, but he's not as rabid a free enterpriser as I am. Even he said that in effect this was a market failure, and he introduced his negative income tax, where in effect you take money from the rich and you give it to the poor, and we're better off. Well, what's the fallacy here? If I don't believe in market failures, and I've just given you a market failure, I think I should, it's incumbent upon me to show says, "Give me your money or I'll shoot you." That's seen as improper, immoral, a violation of rights. Well, when the government does it, it doesn't make it any better. So from an ethical point of view, this is highly problematic. From a what do you call it, a logical point of view, we can have a reductive ad absurdum on this. First of all, the practical. If you take money away from the rich people for being rich, I mean, what was that guy in England who took money from the rich and gave it to the poor? the sheriff of Nottingham, Robin Hood. Robin Hood took money away from the rich and gave it to the poor, is one interpretation of Robin Hood. Another interpretation of Robin Hood is he took it from rich thieves and gave it to poor victims. Well, that's okay. That's very different. But if he took it from rich people just because they're rich and they earn their money honestly, well, that's improper. And from a practical point of view, the people from whom you take money away just because they're rich, they're going to invest in a lot of high-priced accountants and lawyers in order to protect their money. So instead of making everyone richer, they're going to try to defend themselves, or they'll leave. They'll go to another country or another state. In the U.S., California and Massachusetts and New York are blue states, socialist states, democratic states, and they believe in taking money away from the rich and giving it to the poor. And a lot of rich people go to Florida or Texas where they don't believe in this, or at least not as much. And also, if you give money to poor people because they're poor, they'll now have an incentive to stay poor, because that's the way to get money. They have a job and now they've been offered a raise, and if they get a raise on their job, they'll get less money from the transfers, so they'll have less of an incentive to develop their skills and to get promotions, and so that's very bad. We can also do a reductio ad absurdum. Namely, we can say, who says that they're on the same curve? Maybe this is the poor curve, and now we have a rich curve up here. And now, when you take money away from the rich, you're taking more utils away from the rich than you're giving to the poor. I'm not drawing this properly. I should draw it even higher here. So this is the rich curve. This is the rich curve. And now when we take money away from the rich, we're losing this many utils. So this would be a reductio ad absurdum of the technique. Now, another problem with this is once you put utils on an axis, you're into what's called cardinal utility or counting utility. So here you have 10 utils, 9 utils, 8 utils, 7 utils. Well, that kind of utility is highly problematic. I mean, I like this pen more than I like this cough drop. That's ordinal utility, and there's nothing wrong with that. If somehow I had to give up one or the other, I'd give up the cough drop because I value the pen more. No problem. But cardinal utility or counting utility is like saying, well, this pen is 10 utils and this cough drop is 5 utils, and therefore I like the pen twice as much as the cough drop. I mean, that's just silly. And even worse is a thing called interpersonal comparisons of utility, where here it's just my utility for the pen and the cough drop. Whereas for the interpersonal comparison utility, you're comparing the utility of a rich guy with a poor guy. You're saying, well, the rich guy values this at 10 utils, which is nonsense, and I value this at 5 utils, and therefore he values the pen twice as much as me. We're just talking silliness, the way I would see it. Okay, that's one market failure. Let me now erase all of this. Let's see if I can, yeah, boy, I'm good at erasing stuff. Erase, erase, erase. Let me erase everything here. And now we're going to do externalities. Externalities are another market failure. And there are two kinds of market failures. There's positive externalities and negative externalities. And let's do positive. I mean, it sounds like positive externalities would be positive and therefore okay. And negative externalities sounds bad because it's negative. But both are market failures and both are nonsense on a pogo stick. And let me try to illustrate that first by making the case in favor of it. As I did in the case of egalitarian, try to show some sort of logic. I mean, it wasn't totally crazy. There was some coherence, but I think I refuted it. Not originally. I mean, other people have done this way before me. I'm just transmitting what they say. Okay, so now I don't want to erase anymore. I now want to get the pen going. And now we're going to do positive externalities. Well, here, the usual example of positive externalities is education. So I'll put education here, and over here I'll put the price of education. And now we have the demand for education, and the supply of education. And in the free enterprise system, if the price was either below or above the equilibrium point, there would be tendencies pushing toward the equilibrium point. For example, at a lower price, the demand would be greater than the supply, and that would push the price up. At a higher price, let me call a halt now and get back to let me see everybody. Just can you put me back into everybody? Let me see everybody, and sort of leave this here. So I want to come back to it, but I want to address everyone. I want to see everyone. Is that possible to do? No? Well, then I'll just ask, how am I doing so far? I want to make sure that I'm communicating with everybody and that I'm being coherent. I'm not calling for questions now, but I just want to make sure that everyone is following roughly what I'm saying. How am I doing on that? Could somebody reply? Nobody wants to say anything? You hate to see a grown man cry. I'm going to start crying.
Hi, Walter. Sorry about that. Yes, it's great.
Okay,
I'm
good.
not sure if you have to exit the whiteboard view to see us. If you change your view at like the top right corner.
Just leave it as is. It might be too much for a hassle, but I didn't want to go on for 45 minutes and everybody is not getting anything out of it. So I'm glad to have reassurance that what I'm doing is at least coherent. Okay, so
Yes.
let me continue. I don't know. Okay, so now, why is this a market failure? Why? By the way, this is the quantity of education that we have, and I'll call it QA for actual. This is the actual quantity of education we have. Why is this a market failure? And again, I'm going to pick on Milton Friedman, who is pretty much a free enterpriser, but here he's a little socialistic. Why is this a market failure? Because this demand curve is, I'll call it private, PVT, private demand curve. Namely, this demand curve is predicated on the fact that if you go to school, you'll get a better job, you'll be wiser, you'll be happier, you'll meet a better spouse, you'll make better contacts for after school is over, and it's good to have good contacts in business. In other words, these are selfish motives. You are the beneficiary, you students are the beneficiary of this education, you selfish, rotten kids. And but there's a spillover. There's a positive externality. There's a benefit that when you go to education and when you get more educated, you are a better citizen. You will vote better and will have better politicians. You're less likely to commit crimes. Maybe more white-collar crimes, not blue-collar crimes, but that's another issue. But presumably, you'll get a moral education and you'll be less of a criminal. Therefore, we have another demand curve, and here, this is the demand curve, and I'll call this the social demand curve. Namely, these are the spillover benefits that you infer onto other people. And when we add both of these demand curves together, we get a demand curve that I'll call sum of the demands, sum of the social and the private. And now we have a real demand curve. In other words, the people who say that there's a market failure are saying that this is the real demand curve, the total demand curve that takes into account all the benefits of education, not just the private. It adds the private and the socialist, and the private and the social, I shouldn't say socialist. And now we get a new equilibrium. And at this equilibrium, the I'll call this QO for optimal. This is the optimal amount of education. So what we've got to do is move the market failure. The market is failing because it's only producing QA, actual quantity of education, and we want QO. We want the what do you call it? The optimal amount of education. And now, how do we get it? Well, this is unimportant. This is peripheral. One way is we subsidize students. Another way we subsidize professors. Another way we subsidize the universities or colleges or whatever. That's relatively unimportant. How we get there, the key is we got to get there because this is a market failure. Because we should be at QO, say the people, and we're at QA, and this is no good. So again, this is not totally incoherent. There's a logic to this. It's not maniacal in the sense that it has no realm of reason. There's some sort of reason here. Okay, so what's the criticism of it now? Because again, I'm predicated, I'm obligated. No, not obligated, but my view is that there ain't no market failure. And here is a market failure. So I got to say something about why it's not a market failure. And again, I'll categorize my remarks under two headings: one, deontology or rights or ethics, and the other, practicality or logic. Well, the first one on practicality is when you how do we get from QA to QO? Well, we tax people. Where do we get the subsidies for students, or the subsidies for professors, or the subsidies from to universities? We get it from taxes. Well, taxes are problematic because you're forced to pay them whether you agree to or not. And we have a word for compelling people to pay money that they haven't agreed to pay, and it's called theft. So that's one problem with this. It's predicated on robbery. Another is, here you have an elderly woman. She's 85, and she's got no children and no grandchildren and no great grandchildren. And what you're going to do is you're going to tax her in order to, what do you call it? She's getting benefits, and you're going to charge her for the benefits. You got that? She has no children, and you're going to make her pay for other people's children on the ground that if she pays for other people's children, she'll get a benefit. And if she gets a benefit, she should pay for it. Well, look, I'm now going to smile at you. See, I'm smiling. Look at those great teeth. See, and now I'm waving at you. And I benefited you. I want everyone to give me $100. That's the logic of this. I mean, and this is crazy. This is maniacal. I mean, just because I benefit you, I'm able to grab money from you against your will. And look, some of you, I'm not that pretty. I used to be pretty when I was younger. I'm ugly, and I now smile at you, and you don't like that smile. It's disgusting. And really, I'm giving you a negative. I'm not giving you a positive. Well, I tell you, a lot of education. I don't know what it's like in Europe where you guys are, but where I am in the U.S., education is pretty much socialism. Now I have to talk a little bit about the Sodom and Gomorrah test. What's the Sodom and Gomorrah test? In the Bible, there was Sodom and Gomorrah, and they were evil, very bad people, and God was going to smite them all. And an angel went to God and prayed to God, God, let me go to Sodom and Gomorrah, and if I can find 10 righteous people, you'll leave off. You won't smite them. And God said, okay, I'm not a theologian, so I hope I'm not ruining the biblical example. And he went to Sodom and Gomorrah, and he didn't find 10 righteous people, and God smited or smit, I'm not sure about what, Sodom and Gomorrah. So what's the Sodom and Gomorrah test in academia, in education? The Sodom and Gomorrah test in education is, out of all the professoriate at a different school, can you find 10 people, 10 professors who are either conservative or libertarian? And the answer is you can't. My own school, Loyola University, we have about 300 professors, and I think there are 3 or 4 of us who are either conservative or libertarian. Next door, Tulane, a much bigger school, 1,700 professors. There are 3 or 4 there. Happily, one of the professors there is a former student of mine at Loyola, about which I'm very happy, but he's only 1 out of 3 or 4. Harvard, which Donald Trump is now trying to kick its butt, Harvard has, I think, 3,200 professors, and they don't have 10. They failed the Sodom and Gomorrah test. So what's going on here is that this is not a benefit. This is a cost. So what we ought to do is tax education, because we have too much of education, because it's mostly socialist. And, they're bringing young people into socialism. There have been surveys in the United States, at least, with which I'm more familiar, that the educated kids, people 20, 25, whatever, 18 to 25, if they're educated, they're way more socialist than if they're not educated. If they just went to high school and then they dropped out, they're the more educated you are, the more socialist you are. And the reason for that is that the professoriate is mainly socialist. Milton Friedman here had a good idea. He said, why is it that the university is so socialist? Because before the war in Vietnam, it was more equal. You'd get halfy. Now you get a sociology department, and 100% of them are lefties. And what he said, it was the Vietnam War. During the Vietnam War in the United States, if you went to school, you were absolved from the draft. And a lot of conservatives went over to Vietnam because they wanted to fight the commies, whereas the lefties didn't want to. So they all got PhDs, and then they became assistant professors and associates and full professors and deans and college presidents. And that's why. And I think that's a pretty good explanation. Okay, now what I want to do is negative externalities. And what's negative externality? Let me start erasing some stuff. Boy, this is great. I have this great power. I can now erase stuff. And now I'm going to do negative externalities. Should I call for questions, or should I wait till the end to have a discussion about all this? What is your advice?
I think the end is good. Yeah, you're doing great. We really like
Okay.
it.
I'll keep going then. Okay, let me now do negative externalities. What's negative externalities? Again, we have the quantity, and now it's going to be the quantity of steel. Quantity of steel, and this is the price of steel. And again, we have supply and demand. And here's supply, there's demand. And how much steel are we going to have? This will be the actual, this will be the actual quantity of QA. That's the actual amount. Okay, now only this time, instead of looking behind the demand curve, we're going to look behind the supply curve. Well, what's behind the supply curve? What's behind the supply curve is costs. And this is private costs. So if you're making steel, what are the private costs? Well, the private costs are, I don't know, iron. You have to buy iron. You have to buy coal. You have to buy, I don't know, a factory, a foundry. You have to have the interest. You have to borrow interest, and then labor costs. These are all private costs. Everyone got that? Private costs behind the supply curve. But now there are external diseconomies or negative spillover effects. In the previous case, there was supposedly positive. Now they're a negative. And what are the negative ones? The negative one, mainly pollution. So when we add up the private costs and the spillover costs, and we get a a summary of all the costs. And now we know that the quantity of steel should not be QA, but QO. And QO is the optimal amount of steel. So we have to move this way. And again, it doesn't really matter for the argument as to how we get there. We can get there in 2 or 3 ways. One, we can just have a regulation and tell everyone who's producing steel at QA, you got to go to QO. So if this is, say, 150 tons, and we want to go to 100 tons, and there are 3 guys each producing 50, well, they each have to produce 33 1/3. So one way would be we just have a regulation. You got to cut back 1/3 of your steel. Another way is we tax it. And if we tax it, they'll produce less because that will shift the supply curve up to the left, which is what we want, we people who think that there is such a thing as a market failure. And the third way to do it is nationalize. We, the government, we know best. We can make steel better than you private people. You private people are succumb to market failure. We're going to make the proper amount of steel at QO. Okay, so what's wrong with this? Again, I hope that if somebody were listening in and they believe in this crap, they would say, yeah, this is an accurate assessment of what's going on. I mean, that's my goal. I don't know if I would succeed, but this is the way I understand the argument. And I hope that the people who believe this would say, yes, what I'm now doing is roughly what they're saying. Namely, I don't want to misunderstand the argument. I think I'm accurately portraying what it is. Let me now now I want to argue why this is no good. So why is this no good? What's the problem with this? The problem with this is again ethical. You're taxing people, uh, uh, and which is improper. On the other hand, what's going on here with this S over here, which is the spillover? This is not a spillover. This is trespass. When you put soot into the air and into people's lungs, that's not a negative spillover. This is trespass. Now, I have to introduce another concept. The concept now is one of, what the hell is it called? Oh, I'm getting senile here. Continuum. There's such a thing as a continua or continuum. Continuum would be singular, continua would be plural. There is such a thing as a continua. What's a continua? An example is the statutory rape age. We know that if you go to bed with a 5-year-old girl, you are a statutory rapist, even if she agrees, because we don't think she's capable of any agreement. On the other hand, if you go to bed with a 25-year-old woman, and she agrees, whatever you are, you're not a statutory rapist, because we believe that 25-year-old women are capable of making decisions like that. But where do you draw the line? Should it be 15, 17, 19, 16, 18? Those are all reasonable ages, but you can't deduce any of that from the libertarian axiom of non-aggression and private property rights based on homesteading. I'm now going to punch you. Are you entitled to shoot me? No, because we're having a lecture and you know darn well I'm not intending to hit you. But how close does the fist have to be before you can take action? Well, that's another continuum problem. There's no right answer. So when I say trespass, look, I think steel is made in Germany. The land is the first one to own it. Well, in Pittsburgh, they started out making steel, and not only did they homestead a certain amount of territory, say 1 square mile, but they also put dust 10 square miles. And I would say that they have a right to do that. And if you come in later and you then sue them for pollution, you are what's called coming to the nuisance. Namely, they have a right not only to their foundry and all that, but they have a right to pollute. And I'll put little dots here to indicate pollution. And they have a right to do that. So you have to have some sort of rhyme or reason or whatever that in Pittsburgh, if you need an oxygen tent and you walk out into the area in Pittsburgh and you start suing people, you should lose as a plaintiff. So that would be the argument against market failure. Let me now do one more market failure, and then I will do somebody suggested that I do something. How could a private enterprise do things that are usually done by government? And then I'll conclude because it'll be, I don't know, it's already half hour. So another 10, 15 minutes, and then we can break for questions. So now I want to erase everything and look at how well I erase. I'm a great eraser. I have this powerful feeling that I can erase stuff. And now what I'm going to do is the third market failure that I'll deal with is antitrust or monopoly. Now, there is a legitimate thing called monopoly, and this is evil, and it's governmental, and it's an abomination, and we shouldn't have any monopoly of that sort. And what that sort is a monopoly of government privilege. Uh, England fights a battle with France. England wins. The King of England gives the Duke of London a monopoly over making candles. And anyone else making candles other than the Duke of London goes to jail. Well, I should qualify that, because if somebody else wants to make candles and goes to the Duke of London, who has the monopoly over candles, and says, hey, can I please have your permission to make candles? I'll pay you such and such amount. And the Duke of London says, okay, well, then that's okay. But you have to pay the Duke of London to make candles. Another example, in New York City, there were the yellow cabs, and they had a monopoly over cabs. And then the gypsy cabs tried to break in, and they started arresting them. The movie Gandhi, a wonderful movie. There was one scene where a whole bunch of Indians were going into the Indian Ocean with a big pot and coming out with salt water. And then the police were bopping them over the head because they were violating the monopoly of the East India Company to make salt. The British government this is one of the reasons Gandhi wanted England out of there. They gave a monopoly to the East Indian Company. So there's a legitimate understanding of what monopoly is, and that is a government granted privilege. And if you violate that monopoly, you go to jail. But then there's this other kind of monopoly, where IBM was called a monopolist. Why? Because IBM was the only one making computers at the time, and the antitrust people had a 10-year lawsuit against IBM, and finally Microsoft came in, and then they dropped the case. But this is not monopoly. This is just called single seller status, SSS, single seller status. It just means, look, suppose McDonald's outcompetes Burger King and Wendy's and pizza and everything else. And now you want fast food, you got to go to McDonald's. Did they get a monopoly? No, they just got single seller status. They had 99 or 100% of the fast food market. And from a libertarian point of view, this would be entirely legitimate, because they got it honestly by making a better product at a lower price. Okay, so now with that introduction, now let me introduce wait, I got to get a pen, the monopoly diagram. So here's the monopoly diagram, and this is a little bit more complicated than what do you call it, supply and demand. This is average cost, and this here is marginal cost, and the marginal cost has got to hit the average cost at the bottom of it. This is marginal cost. And here you have a demand curve. I'm going to erase that demand curve. It wasn't really as pretty as I would like. I hope I can just erase there it is. Wow. And now I'm going to go and try to make a better demand curve. And here is the demand curve. And now I have to make a marginal revenue curve. That was a lousy marginal revenue curve. I've got to erase it. Try better. Whoops. I'm erasing stuff. I shouldn't be erasing stuff. Oh, hell, I'm going to draw the whole thing over. Sorry for my screw up. Let me try again. Here is price, and this is quantity, and this is price, and here's the average cost curve, and here's the marginal cost curve. This is the average cost curve, and here is the demand curve. Boy, that's a straight line demand curve. I'm getting drunk. Demand curve, and here's the marginal revenue curve. Sorry, I'm not going to mess around with this anymore. Okay, so here is where the perfect competitor would be, and here is where the monopolist would be. The monopolist would be over here, and you can see that the price of the so-called monopolist, this is not really a monopolist, and here is the price of the competitor. And there are four arguments against the monopolist, so-called monopolist. First of all, the quantity of the competitor will be greater than the quantity of the monopolist. This is the quantity of the monopolist. And the price of the monopolist will be higher than the price of the competitive industry. And the third one is that the competitive industry makes no profit. And the fourth one is this thing over here, this triangle. It's called the dead weight loss. And these are the arguments against the monopoly. And now my criticism. Again, I hope that I'm being accurate. My curves are a little wonky, but doing the best I can. What's wrong with the price being higher? The price of a Maserati is higher than the price of a cough drop. Does that mean that the Maserati is bad? There are more Maseratis produced than cough drops. Does that mean that the quantity is insufficient? What they accuse the monopolist, so-called monopolist, of reducing or cutting back in order to raise the price. Well, there's nothing wrong with the less production than more production per se, and given the same thing with price. And then this is the profit box here. This box here is profits. And there's nothing wrong with earning a profit. It's true in equilibrium, you never earn a profit, but we're never in equilibrium, we're always tending there. And here is the most powerful argument, the dead weight loss. Namely, we, the people, value the product that they're not producing, the area under that curve, and it only costs the area under the marginal cost curve. So you get this dead weight loss box. And this is another instance of interpersonal comparisons of utility, which we met before, and it's highly problematic. Look, why blame this so-called monopolist? At least he's producing this much. Why not blame everyone else for not producing any steel or whatever this product is? So that would be my argument against this. And now let me do the last thing that I said I would do, and that is take a case of what do you call it? Government produces this stuff, but the private enterprise could do it. And I have written an entire book on this. Let me show you the book. It's called The Privatization of Roads and Highways. It's a big fat book, so if you hit somebody over the head with it, you have a good weapon here. And the argument here is, how can the private enterprise make roads? Only government can make roads. And in the first half of this book, what I do is I try to show how the government, how the private enterprise can do it. And in the second half of the book, I try to talk about objections to the theory. My main motivation for writing this book was, I don't know what it is in Europe, but in the US, 40,000 people a year die on the nation's highways, whether pedestrians or car crashes or whatever. 40,000. To put that into context, in Katrina, I'm in New Orleans. Katrina killed, well, it was the Army Corps of Engineers, but Katrina is claimed to have killed a lot of people. You know how many people they killed? 1,900 people. A mere pittance. And that was a one-shot deal. And then the 9/11, where they knocked down the World Trade Center, only 4,000 people, only 3,000 people died there. Now, look, every life is precious. 1,900 people is nothing to sneeze at. 3,000 people is nothing to sneeze at. But 40,000 people every year? In Canada, they have roughly 10% of our population, and they have roughly 10% of the motor vehicle fatalities. Okay, so my second motivation is traffic congestion. I mean, most cities, you know, I do competitive race walking, and at one time I was beating cars because the cars were bumper to bumper, and the race was right near a road. I was beating the cars walking, and walking is not very fast, especially at my age. The congestion is horrible. The Long Island Expressway in New York City, along Long Island, is called the longest parking lot in the world because it's 100 miles wide. It's east-west, and sometimes it's just bumper to bumper the whole way. And the answer to congestion is peak load pricing. You charge more during the peak load, which in the U.S. it's from 7 in the morning until midnight. Midnight, you just charge more. They do that for skiing resorts. In the winter, they charge more. In the summer, they charge less. Same for hotels. In the season, the hotel price is high. Off season, it's lower. Movies for the Saturday night movie, they cost more for the Tuesday afternoon matinee. So the solution for that, and they tried that in New York City, and it worked out pretty well. Well, certainly private companies would do that. Why do I say that the government highways are responsible for these massive deaths? The reason I say that is because we don't have competition. We have competition in pens. We have competition in cough drops. We have competition in making dolls like this. We have competition in making shirts. Our shirts and our dolls and our cough drops are pretty good because of competition. But there's no competition because the government runs all the roads. Every last road is under the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which is a monopoly. And we should get rid of that. Let me give you a few examples of how we might save lives. Here is a 3-lane highway. I'm in New Orleans, where this is lane A, lane B, and lane C. I'm in New Orleans. We're right near the I-10 highway. It goes all the way from Florida to California. It goes right through New Orleans. And the minimum speed is, you have to do 40 miles an hour, and the maximum speed is 70. Well, I tell you, when somebody is over here doing 70, you know what happens? Everybody goes around them and they start honking them. Because most people in the 70, and I'm talking when it's not at night and it's a clear day, most people are doing 78, 80, 82, something like that. So if you're legally doing 70 in the 70 zone, you're going to create accidents. Would it be better in my road? What I'm going to do is I'm going to say everyone has to do 60 here, and over here everyone has to do 70, and over here everyone has to do 80. Would that be an improvement? Would that save lives? The answer is we don't know. I own this road and I do 80, 70, 60. You own this road, and what you do is you do 65, 75, and 85. Namely, everybody in the left lane has to do 85. You can't do 86, you can't do 84. Well, within reason. I mean, if you're 84, 86, what the heck? But everybody has to do 85 here, 75 here, 65. Which, this is road X and this is road Y. Which road will save more lives? And the answer is we don't know. Well, what kind of a way to run a railroad is that? Where we don't know what will save lives? Now, if we had privatization, we would have the X road would do his way and the Y road would do his way. And then let's say X was better. Well, then X would brag and have, what do you call it, notices that the X road is better than the Y road. And customers would leave the Y road and go to the X road, or the Y road would now follow the X procedures. And we'd find out what's the best way of having speed limits. So that would be just one way that we could save lives. Let me talk just about, there are many, many others. I had tons of them. Let me just talk about one objection. The objection is, here, I have to erase everything. The objection to this is eminent domain, that private roads couldn't get started because I want to build a road from New Orleans. Whoops, I got to get a pen. I want to build roads from New Orleans to Los Angeles, which is, I don't know, 2,000 miles away, something like that. And I want to build a road. I want to build a road as the crow flies. The crow flies a little crooked because my hand, I can't make a straight line to save me, but I'm doing the best I can. Well, how many people own property between New Orleans and Los Angeles. I don't know, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000, who knows? A lot of people own property. And then what you have is a problem of what's called the holdout. Hold out. My favorite example to illustrate the holdout is Cartman on the South Park. And Cartman is a cartoon character on South Park, which is a great TV show. A bunch of libertarians run it. And Cartman's what do you call it? Motto is screw you guys, screw you guys, screw you guys. So Cartman owns this land over here, and he says, sure, you can build a road through my property. But if you do, I'm going to charge you a zillion dollars. So what we do is we go over here. It doesn't have to be as the crow flies. We use A, or we use B pattern. And one way to do it is we send a notice to everybody along the road A and say, look, we're going to build a road there and we're going to pay double the ordinary price of the land. And as soon as you guys get together and you all agree, then we'll build on road A or road B. So that would be one way around Cartman. But now Cartman owns all of this land. And the only feasible way to do it is from A to B. You can have other roads in between, but you can't go too far. You don't want to go up to Chicago. You don't want to go down to Mexico. So Cartman owns all that land. And then Cartman says, I'm a holdout, and screw you guys. You can't make a road. And now we get to something more complicated. We get to a thing called eminent domain. What's eminent domain? Eminent domain is... Let me see if I can spell it right. Eminent domain is if you own a square mile of land, you own down to the core of the earth, and you own up into the heavens. That's the eminent domain view of ownership of land. Well, the eminent domain is very different than the libertarian. The libertarian is based on John Locke, and John Locke says you only own what you homestead, and Cartman hasn't homesteaded stuff. Right here is the core of the earth, which is 4,000 miles away. He hasn't homesteaded any of that. He hasn't homesteaded anything over here, which is a mile down. So we can build a road, a bridge over Cartman's land, or a what do you call it, a tunnel under his land, because the eminent domain is problematic. If eminent domain were correct, you couldn't have airplanes flying, because Cartman would charge you when an airplane flew over your territory. So that doesn't work. There are other complications, because then Cartman would do is put a bunch of sticks over his land to interfere with our bridge, or a bunch of sticks down there. And now we have to get into football theory. What's football theory? Football theory is it's a lot easier to run the ball when you're on your own goal line. Here is a football field. Here is a football field, and here are the end zones. And I say it's a lot easier to run the ball when you're at your own end zone, because you have the whole field to work with. Whereas when you're having a goal line stand, it's very hard. You'd be happy to make 5 inches territory here. You get 4 downs, because you've only got this little area to work with. Well, how big is the football? The football is, let me erase this now. The football is, well, how big is the football? The football is, I don't know, 3 lanes here, and 3 lanes here, and each lane is 10 feet. So you have 30 feet, and 40 feet there. You have 100 feet. A very narrow football to get through Cartman. And how much land does Cartman have? Well, Cartman has 50 miles. Remember, here is what do you call it, New Orleans, and here is L.A., and this is the way we want to make the road, and Cartman owns this. He's got 50 miles, and we've only got 100 feet, so we're going to beat him. So that would be my objection to the objection that you need eminent domain, and eminent domain means only the government can run the roads or build roads in the first place. Okay, I'm now finished with, I hope I've done justice to what you asked for. You asked for market failure, and I gave you 3 market failures. Let's get rid of the screen now, and let me see the audience again. So I gave 3 market failures. One was egalitarianism, the other was externalities, and the third one was monopoly. And I gave an example of where the market could take over a government apparatus, which kills millions of people, or 40,000 people a year. So now I'm open to discussion, dialogue, questions, objections, whatever.
Okay, thank you very much, Walter. Can you see us?
Yeah, I can see individual people, and I see a table full of a whole bunch of people. Justin,
Yes.
thank you. Good. It doesn't have to be a question. It could be an objection, a comment, whatever you're comfortable with. No questions? Everything.
I have a question. I have a question at the end too. It's anyone questions on externalities?
What's your question?
Okay, I have a question about the non-aggression principle, libertarian ethics. We faculty are anarchists. Some of the students are minarchists, hopefully transitioning into anarchism. Yeah, so my question is, we trust that a decentralized order creates harmony. It provides institutions that facilitate exchange, banking institutions, insurance institutions, jurisprudence, private security. So, and we trust that the outcome would be a prosperous, a harmonious, and interdependent, interconnected social order. The question is, why don't we trust this decentralized order, the market system, to generate a value system, a norm, traditions that aligns with libertarian ethics, but as a posteriori, as a consequence, rather than as a priori? Because the way I understand your view or Mary Rothbard's view is that libertarianism or libertarian ethics and the non-aggression principle is a priori to anarchic order. And I'm suggesting that that would be an outcome to a decentralized order. I just want to know your view. What do you think?
Well, I think you got 2 or 3 points in there. I'm going to put words in your mouth. I think one of your questions or concerns is, if libertarianism is so great, why do we have so few libertarians? And I would answer that on the basis of sociobiology. What is sociobiology? Sociobiology is the theory that we are the way we are. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody said something. Did I misunderstand? Should I continue with sociobiology?
No, sorry. I think it might just be an echo, but keep going,
okay.
please.
So let me continue. Sociobiology is the theory that we are the way we are because of what it took 1 million years ago when we were in the caves or in the trees and we were barely upright. We were just sort of half human and half ape. What it took to survive and leave progeny to the next generation. And for example, why is it that men have a better sense of direction than women on average? I mean, there are some women that have a much better sense of direction than some men. On average, men are taller than women, but there are women who are 7 foot tall, and I'm only 5'6". But on average, men are heavier than women, but there are women who are much heavier than men. But on average, men have a better sense of direction, and women have much more meticulous. They're able to find things in the refrigerator that men can't find. Why is this? Well, the reason is because during these caveman days, the men had to go 10, 15 miles away to find an antelope. And the women had to pick berries right near the cave. And if you sent out the women to hunt buffalo or whatever it was, and the men stayed in the cave, they didn't have any progeny because the women didn't come back, and the women are the what's the word the limitation on population. The farmer keeps one bull and 50 cows, not 50 bulls and one cow. So the women are more precious than men. The women stayed close to the cave. The men went all over the place. Well, if you go all over the place and you don't get back to the cave, you don't leave children. So they were weeded out if men were weeded out if they didn't have a good sense of direction. Women were weeded out if they couldn't tell the difference between a poisonous berry and a regular berry. So that would be one reason or one explanation of sociobiology on present human behavior. Another one is that
I'll ask him to repeat. Walter, so sorry to interrupt you. The audio cut out right on the beginning of your second point. Can you please repeat the second point?
what was my second point? How far did you get? What was the last thing that you heard?
We heard that that's why men have a good sense of direction, and then another point.
Okay, then more to the more direct to the why do we have Hitlers and Stalins and Mao Zedongs and Pol Pots and terrorists and murderers and rapists? Well, a million years ago, if you were strong and you could beat up the weaker man, you would leave more children. So that's one reason that now I'm not saying that all socialists are rapists and murderers, but the point is that free enterprise and libertarianism and the non-aggression principle is something that is didn't not that many people got it because of sociobiology. Now, I have a long article. It's one of the best articles I've ever written. It got rejected 46 times from journals. But if any of you are interested, email me and I'll send you that article, about which I'm very proud. My email address is available to everybody, right, from Matthew. So if you're interested in anything, maybe this book you're interested in, whatever it is, I can only answer questions or make discussion for another, 15 minutes or so. And if people have more questions, email me and I'll communicate with you in that way. Okay, so I think one point is, why are there so few libertarians? Another is a decentralization. I'm not really a big fan of decentralization. I'm just as much of a fan of centralization, as long as it's voluntary. So I don't put emphasis on centralization. Look, when Ronald Reagan was the president, he wanted to get rid of rent control in New York City. And I thought that was a great idea, even though that's centralization. You see, the idea behind decentralization is, if you have only one boss, Ronald Reagan president or Donald Trump president, it's not as good as if you have 50 states in the US and many, many governors, many, many mayors of many, many other cities. But I say the way to determine whether centralization or decentralization is good in any given case is not whether it's centralization or decentralization, but rather, is it good or not? And rent control is not good. And if the centralizer wants to get rid of rent control, well, then I'm a centralist. If the centralizer wants to prohibit all drugs, and Oregon wants to legalize not marijuana, but cocaine, well, I support decentralism because I favor legalization of all drugs. So to me, it's not a matter of centralization or decentralization. What I'd like to do now is to go into how the court system would work. And in order to do that, I need the screen again. So whoever's in charge of the screen, give me the screen again. And I want to illustrate how the market could do better than the government, or how the market could do anything in terms of courts. because that's another, what do you call it, function that the government claims a monopoly over. Could you give me back the screen?
Yes, we're pulling it up.
Okay, now there are five guys. Whoops. There are five guys. There's A. Whoops. I need a pen. Here's a pen. There's A. Oh, I have a much thinner thing. B, C, D, and E. And E and A get into a hassle. They have a disagreement over maybe the apple tree of A is dropping apples on E and he doesn't like it, or maybe he's picking the apples, or maybe the boundary between A and E is unclear. Who knows? They're having a dispute. And they're both civilized people, and they're not going to fight. And what they do is they say, well, let's go to a court, and a private court, because there's no centralized government court. Let's go to a private court, and the court will settle it. And A says, let's go to B. And E says, what? B? He's your brother. He'd be biased in your favor. I don't want to go to your brother. And E says, well, let's go to D. D is a court. And A says, what? I don't want to go to D. He's your cousin. He's going to be on your side. He's going to be biased in your favor. So they each go to their own court. A goes to the B court, E goes to the D court. Now there are four possibilities. One possibility is that both B and D will go along with A. That's one possibility. B and D will go along with A. And by the way, when you go to D court, what you do is you sign a contract to be bound by whatever D says. And D not only has a court, but he has a police division also to make sure that that contracts are adhered to. So one possibility is that both B and D agree with A, and that's it. No problem. Another possibility is that both B and D agree with E. Again, no problem, because now A is in the lurch. A lost, but too bad on A. He lost both courts. Even his own brother voted against him. Now, it's possible that D will favor A, and D will favor A, and B will favor E, but let's forget about that. Let's suppose that B favors A, and D favors E. I'm now answering the question of how can we move minarchists up toward anarchism? And now we have the two courts disagree. B supports A, and D supports E. And when Ayn Rand Ayn Rand was a minarchist, not an anarchist. And when she did this sort of a thing, she said, blank out. There's no answer. But there is an answer. What's the answer? Well, the answer is that if B and D are both legitimate courts, I'm going to say L for legitimate, they're both legitimate courts, they will have anticipated the possibility that one day in the future, they will be on opposite sides of a decision. And it happens. Judges disagree with each other. Now, we haven't mentioned C. And they will say, now there might be C, there might be C prime, there might be C double prime, there might be C triple prime, there might be a whole bunch of people that D and B have agreed to. That is, they will abide by whatever C says. And maybe it's just C, and maybe they, I don't know, flip a coin as to which of the C's they'll go to. And that would be the solution. Now, suppose one of them is not legitimate. One of them is a bandit court. Well, a bandit court says, my way or the highway. I don't recognize any other court unless they agree with me. And anyone that disagrees with me, I'll fight. And now the point is, this is an economic point, the legitimate courts will only have to fight illegitimate courts, because any other legitimate court, they'll go to see. Whereas the bandit courts are going to have to fight everybody. They're going to have to fight other bandit courts. They're going to have to fight all the legitimate courts. The bandit courts will lose out in the market process. And how will C, B, and D be chosen in the first place? They'll be chosen on the basis of brilliance and wisdom. And how are judges picked now. They're picked by a political process. And also, there is such a thing. What is it? The pen is mightier than the sword. The pen is legitimate courts. The sword is bandit courts. The pen will beat out the sword almost always. So that would be the answer as to how, under private enterprise, the court system could work. And let me continue further on this anarchism business. If you're really a minarchist, look, I'm now going to get into a fight with Matt. Matt and I are having a fight. The argument for government is that the government is going to make sure that Matt and I behave. Well, if you believe in that argument for government, you have to believe in world government. Why do you have to believe in world government? Because right now, the relationship of Albania and Argentina is one of anarchism, because the UN is not the world government. It's trying, but it's not yet. The relationship between Burundi and Brazil is anarchy, one of anarchy. There's no world government. The relationship between any two countries, between all countries, is one of anarchism. So if you're really against anarchism, you have to favor world government. The problem with world government is, well, if it was democratic, the whole world would be sort of like India, Pakistan, and China, because between the three of them, I think they have more than half the people, give or take. So I think the reductio ad absurdum of the minarchist position is world government. I'm Jewish. We're always running away from one country to another. This country kicks us out. Germany welcomed us in the 1920s, and then they kicked us out. Well, they didn't kick us out, but the point is we're the wandering Jew. Well, if there was a world government, there'd be no place to wander. Mars is not yet open. The moon is not yet open. So world government is a very bad idea. And you minarchists are reductio ad absurdum. You have to favor the world government, which I think is a big pill to swallow. If you could turn me back to the audience and get rid of the screen, maybe we could have another question or a follow-up or whatever you guys wanted. Anyone?
Can you hear me? Hi. Professor, we were talking during the break. I digress a bit, but I think you're going to like this question. So we were talking during the break. One of those students asked me, do you think Black people had it better before the civil rights movement and Martin King or after Martin King?
Oh, much
That's
worse.
my question.
Much worse. Not only Martin Luther King, but also LBJ. Look, before the, I don't know what year you'd want. Act was 1964. Between 1937 and 1964, before that period, the Black people were much better off. After, much worse off. Why? One reason, and now I'm channeling Charles Murray, who wrote The Bell Curve, but he wrote a different book called Losing Ground. And what he said is, before LBJ, there was welfare, very, very small, little bit of welfare. And if you wanted welfare, you had to go through conniptions to get it. Afterward, they stuffed welfare down the throats of everyone. My research shows that in 1910, 1920, 1930, the rate of family formation of white and Black was about the same. The whites were 1% better than the Blacks in terms of family formation. Nowadays, 3/4 of Black kids are without a father, and 1/3 of white kids are without a father. Why? Because whites are richer than Blacks, and they're less likely to be vulnerable to the blandishment. Look, they say that if you throw a frog into boiling water, its metabolism is that it jumps out. On the other hand, if you put a frog in cold water and you heat it up slowly, the frog's metabolism can't tell the difference between this degree and that degree, and it sits there and it gets boiled. Slavery was like throwing the Black family into the boiling water, and it jumped right out, and the family of the Black people was just about as intact as the white family in 1910, 1920, 1930. After 1865, there were all sorts of letters. A black guy, Joe, says, "Mary, where are you? I was in this plantation," and that got the families back together. Family formation is very, very important in terms of well-being. There are no intact, I shouldn't say there are no black intact families that are poverty-stricken. I just say that 1% are very, very few intact black families. The poverty is from non-intact black families. So that's one reason that the black people are much better off before the government got in there to help them. What do they say with enemies like this? You don't need friends. With friends like the government, you don't need enemies. Another reason, in 1937, there was the minimum wage law. And before the minimum wage law, before 1937 or 1935, I forget when it came in, the rate of unemployment of blacks and whites was about the same. Again, whites were 1% better. The rate of unemployment of adults and teenagers was about the same. Again, adults were a little bit better. After the minimum wage, the unemployment look, suppose I went to a black community with a gun and I said, "If you get a job, I'll shoot you." What would we call me? We'd call me some sort of maniac. Well, that's what the minimum wage law does, in effect. It, in effect, says to black teenagers, forget about it, you're not getting a job. Well, if you're not getting a job, you're bored. And if you're bored, you're going to get into crime. And if you get into crime, you're going to go to jail. So the black family, I think, is much worse off due to the munificence of government than it otherwise would have been.
Can you say that again?
Yes.
You me?
Yeah.
I said thank you kindly, sir.
I promised you guys an hour, and it's about an hour now. So maybe one last question or one last comment.
I have a question. Can you talk about your feelings on the inherent interplay of innovation and monopolies and how the monopoly has an incentive for innovation?
That's a good one. That's an empirical question. Well, do you mean monopoly or do you mean single seller status?
I think I'm talking about a monopoly, how they have the incentive to innovate, to keep their status a monopoly, to keep ahead of the competition.
Oh, no. If you have to keep ahead of the competition, you talk about single seller status.
Okay.
Because if you have a monopoly, nobody can do anything unless you get your permission. And if they do something that you don't like, you put them in jail. So I would say that monopoly will reduce innovation, whereas single seller status probably would increase innovation. But it's an empirical issue, and I couldn't say for sure. I haven't done the research. I'm not aware of the research, but there probably is a correlation between large size and innovation. I'm not sure. I mean, Bill Gates started out in his basement or in his parents' garage, and he innovated, and there was no single seller status for him ever. So Thomas Edison invented a lot of stuff. Rockefeller invented stuff on, and this is before Rockefeller had most of the market. He was able to deal with oil, refine oil better than anyone else. So it's an important question. But let me change the question. Let me answer a different question that's sort of related. And the question is, not will large size bring about more innovation, but will patents bring about more innovation? So it's not exactly what you're asking, but it's not totally irrelevant. I'm sure you'll agree. Now here, my guru, my mentor is a guy named Stefan Kinsella. And he has done more good work on this than any other 10 people. Well, maybe 9 people. I'm not sure about that. What he says is, if I can put words in his mouth, and he'll probably correct me because I never get it perfectly right. But when you introduce a patent system, you'll probably get more innovation because supply curves slope in an upward direction. And if you offer more to people for inventing stuff, you'll get more invention. But after a while, what happens with the patent system is that people get patents in order to sue other people for patent infringement. This is what happened with the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers invented the airplane, and instead of perfecting the airplane, they spent the next decade or two suing other people for trying to make improvements on the airplane. The patent system is also problematic in the sense that it only gives you for 30 years or 60 years or 5 years after the death of the inventor or something like that. But look, I own this pen. And this is permanent. I can own this pen forever. And I can give it to my kid and my grandchildren. They can give it, if we ever have great grandchildren, they can give it. Well, if you can really own ideas, why should it be limited in time? It should be forever. Well, if it's forever, then the reductio ad absurdum is every word in the English language, and I'm sure in every other language too, was invented by somebody. The word somebody was invented by Mr. Somebody. The word word was invented by Mr. Word. The word is was invented by Mr. Is. Well, if you really believe in this patent business, you are an interloper by using any language because it should be owned by other people permanently, not just for 10 years or 20 years. Well, I now say that any theory that can't even be articulated in any language has got a problem with it. Let me try again. Girl A puts her hair up in a ponytail, keeps her hair out of her face, makes her look pretty, whatever. And she gets a patent on ponytails. Why not? Girl B starts putting her hair up in a ponytail, and girl A slaps her in the face and takes out the rubber band and undoes her ponytail. Did girl A steal anything? Girl B steal anything from girl B? No. Girl A still has a ponytail. Look, I invent the bicycle. You steal my bicycle, I don't have the bicycle anymore. You steal it, you look at the bicycle and you say, hey, that's a great idea. I'll make one. I still have my bicycle. So the patent system is very anti-libertarian from a libertarian point of view, and maybe from a practical point of view, when it gets initially introduced, it might have more innovation. But after a while, a lot of very intelligent people, instead of out there in their laboratories inventing stuff, they're in the courtroom fighting over who has the patent right. So I'm sorry I couldn't answer the question you asked. But I try to recoup by answering something that you didn't ask, but at least it was sort of close.
Thank you.
Well, look, I got to go. This was a pleasure. If you invite me again, I'll be happy to come. I think the Menger Institute is a great group.
Walter, so sorry, we need.
We have a student from Colombia. He wants to ask a question. One last question. 1 minute question.
One more. Hang on, just one.
Yeah. So,
Matthew, I can't talk to you now, but I'll call you right back. Go ahead.
yeah. So my question is basically just to know like how like private or like market institutions will offer solutions for common goods. Let's say the air, or just like an ocean, or something that it's like the line between like for me, like being private or like the community to own it, like how it would works.
Hold on 1 second. I have 4 books in my privatization series. The first book was Why We Should Privatize Everything. The second one was Privatize Roads. The third one was Privatize Space. The fourth one is more relevant to you, how to privatize, the case for privatizing oceans, rivers, lakes, and aquifers. And maybe if I come on board again, I mean, each one is worth an hour probably, but I could do all 3 or all 4 in 1 hour maybe. The problem with the oceans is the tragedy of the commons. When you own something in common, you don't take care of it. My best example of that is the cow and the buffalo. The cow never went within 1 million miles of extinction. The buffalo almost became extinct. Why? They're the same animal, My apologies to the biologists who see a difference. They're big, they're fat, they're smelly. You crash into one or the other, you're in trouble. Why is it that the buffalo almost went extinct? Because it was never allowed to be owned. Once nowadays, buffalo can be owned, so they're no longer in danger of extinction. The same with elephants in Africa. Botswana has the most private enterprise and the most elephants. They don't have full private enterprise. So I say that we should have privatization of the oceans and the rivers. By the way, the Mississippi River should be owned by the Mississippi River Corporation. And who is the owner of it? The government. And who killed 1,900 people? The Army Corps of Engineers. Their levees fell, and New Orleans is below the surface of the water, and the water came pouring in and killed 1,900 people. So my answer, when you say common goods, there ain't no such thing as a common good. There's only private goods, or rather, there only should be private goods, and each person should own something. Everything should be owned privately. That would be the tenor of my first book. So you're at Columbia University? I got.
Yeah.
I got my PhD there.
No, I'm from Colombia.
Like Columbia.
Yeah.
Columbia, the country, not Columbia University. Okay.
Yeah.
I really got to go. I had that other appointment. I had
Okay, thank you so much.
Take care. I enjoyed this, and thanks for your attention. But I got to go.